Welcome to the Bowl Season Stories Podcast, Season 2, Episode 5. I'm Nick Carparelli, the Executive Director of Bowl Season, and today we are joined by television personality, podcast host, a college football playoff ambassador, Rachel Lindsay, New England Patriots head coach, Bill Belichick, and the CEO of Florida Citrus Sports, Steve Hogan. Today's show is brought to you by Sport Radar, reimagining immersive experiences for sports fans and bettors. This first guest, I honestly don't even know how to introduce her. She does everything, it seems. She's an attorney, author, media personality, guest host, speaker, hosts a podcast. She's worked in multiple capacities for ESPN. She was a contestant on The Bachelor and the star of The Bachelorette, as well as something we'll talk a lot about today. She's an ambassador for the College Football Playoff Foundation and the Extra Yard for Teachers program. Please welcome to the show, Rachel Lindsay. Rachel, did I miss anything? I mean, do you have any free time? I mean,
I have free time right now, Nick. Free time right now. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction.
Well, first off, you are a college football fan. Tell me, what do you think? What do you think of the season so far? I mean, we've had such great games. The ratings are off the charts. Anything in particular impress you or jump out at you in this? I think we're going into week 4.
I can't believe it's already week 4. It always moves by too fast. I mean, I am a Texas Longhorns fan through and through. Got to put that out there, hook 'em horns. So I'm obviously excited about my team and what they're doing. Sadly, we lost our quarterback, but we seem to be, holding on strong there. Because I'm married to an SEC guy, I have to pay attention to Florida as well. So I've been following them and what they're doing. He's not as excited as me right now when it comes to football teams. But no, I think I think we have great matchups. Starting with week 1, there were so many great games, upsets. It's just been a really fun thing to watch. And I'm really excited to see. I feel like right now, I don't know, this is going to sound negative. Maybe teams were prematurely ranked, because I think we're going to be surprised come bowl season as to who makes the playoffs.
I couldn't agree with you more, Rachel. I love that you said that. I tend to think oftentimes teams are prematurely ranked. I've been an advocate of why do we even have polls before the season starts? We should wait till halfway through the season to do it, because you don't know who's good. I mean, so many kids are coming and going and recruiting, and I think we saw that early on, especially with some of the lesser known brands with App State and Georgia Southern and Marshall having big wins. I mean, those were fun to watch.
Exactly. Now, unless my team is ranked, then it's okay. But other than that,
your team's probably underranked all the time in your mind.
I'd rather that.
Well, Rachel, catch us up a little bit. I was joking earlier with all the things you've done and what you're involved in, and what are you up to these days? How's your career going?
Thank you for asking. I mean, I feel like I wear so many hats. I mean, I obviously work for Extra 6 out of 7 days a week. You can catch that wherever, you check your local listings, but we're nationwide. So I do that where I'm covering entertainment news, which was always fun. And that's always changing and exciting. And then I have my podcast, Higher Learning, where we cover, Black culture and how it intersects with politics and current affairs and sports and entertainment. So there's so much there. And I love it so much because I feel like a lot of the audience has come over from Bachelor Nation, as they call it, but it started in 2020. So it's really been great for so many people. We have such a diverse audience and we learn and grow with each other. So that's been fun. Now, my guilty pleasure is Bravo TV. I love all things housewives. So I recently have a podcast called Morally Corrupt, which is named after a famous Bravo moment, where we cover things from Real Housewives to Summer House to whatever it is you watch on Bravo TV. And then I also write a weekly blog called Honestly Rach, where I just cover certain issues that are important to me between love, life, career, and everything in between. And then I had a book come out this year. Did I forget something?
I don't know. I can't keep track. I mean, if you can't keep track of your own stuff, I don't know who can, Rachel.
It's so true.
Well, I got to admit, I'm not a big Bravo watcher, but maybe for you, I'll tune in a little bit and see what I find.
You won't regret it. You won't regret it.
Maybe I really will regret it. One of the two. But now you've been involved with Extra Yard for Teachers for a while now. You were one of the first spokespeople for their national effort to support teachers. So important. Other than the obvious, what was the motivation to want to be involved and stay involved?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people don't realize that or don't know that I was a substitute teacher between college and going to law school. And it was an experience that completely changed my life. I actually thought about not going to law school and just becoming a teacher. And then I eventually went ahead with law school, but it's something that I always said I wanted to be connected to. So I was mentoring kids. I was helping them prepare their essays for college. I was doing this through a program at church. And then, excuse my dog in the background. And then I said, how can I be connected now that I have this platform? And so I am from Dallas. I was lucky enough to where I was connected with Britton Banowski, who is the executive director of College Football Playoff Foundation. And from there, this has just been a partnership that's now going on 5 years. My mom's a teacher. Aunts and uncles were teachers and coaches. So education is something that's really near and dear to me. And I just want to bring awareness to help teachers in the teaching profession, however I can do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Some of the statistics are staggering. I don't think enough people pay attention. The biggest problem we have in America is finding good teachers and keeping them in the education workforce. Like you said, you mentioned Britton. I know you talk to him often. What are some of the main issues and efforts that they are taking on to combat that?
Retention is like a huge issue right now in the teaching profession. I mean, they're big on recruitment, retention, professional development, but retention is huge. I mean, since COVID, we're really seeing this huge exit from teachers because they feel underpaid. They don't feel like they're getting that support. We've always talked about how they didn't feel like they could supply their classrooms already. They were already in need for that. And then with COVID and the difficulties with that, with distance learning, you're just seeing such an increase in hardship. And so people are leaving. So one of the things that the foundation is, among many things, is always trying to pinpoint what that issue is, specifically nationwide, but also in the city where the bowl game or the championship game will be. So this year it's in Los Angeles, where I live now. I will not call that my home city because I am a Texan all the way through. But right now they're focusing in Los Angeles and specifically in Inglewood and identifying the needs there.
One of the things we're proud of is bowl season's commitment to being involved with the Extra Yard for Teachers in the big day, which was Tuesday. I think most people assumed, and rightfully so, when the Extra Yard for Teachers started, it was almost exclusively a college football playoff initiative involving those very, small handful of bowl games that are involved in the CFP. But last year, and actually this year as well, this is the second consecutive year that every bowl, all 42 of them, participated in the big day, surprising teachers in the bowl games in those communities. What are your impressions of the big day and the impact it makes around the country?
I mean, the fact that it's affecting so many teachers nationwide, and I think it's huge. And I love that there's this correlation between sports and education because we're dealing with student athletes. And so a lot of times you forget to highlight the student part of the athlete. And student is actually what's mentioned first. So what I love so much is that's what the foundation is doing. That's what the big day is all about. And it's really about getting, teachers involved, but also the student athletes and coaches and schools. And I just love that it's such a perfect fit. And I think that's why another reason I wanted to be involved so much, because there's just so much synergy between the two. And it was a no-brainer that the foundation's mission should be what it is. And so days like the big, oh my gosh, big game day, big bowl day, what's the correct name?
The big day. It's just the big day.
Yeah. The big day. That's why things like that are so influential and so important.
Yep. No doubt about it. I mean, you're right. They're student athletes. They're learning in the classroom. They're also playing a sport, and most great coaches like to say that they're teachers first, so you're spot on. The connection is just a natural. Now, you mentioned being a Texas fan. I'm assuming you've been to bowl games that Texas has participated in the past. Any memories of those?
have I, Nick? I was at the national championship game in 2006 of January, my first time coming to Los Angeles. I was there in Pasadena. I was there when we won that game against USC. I will never forget it. I have never cried at a sporting event until that moment, because if you go back to that time, if you were a Texas fan, you thought the game was over. You thought we were losing. But then Vince Young, carried the team and led us to victory. And it was such a moment I'll never forget. And then we got lost afterwards and had to ride home with a player's parent. It was like a whole ordeal. But that moment was incredible. I mean, I went to Texas. My parents went to Texas. My sister went to Texas, aunts and uncles. So we definitely bleed burnt orange. So to be there, not just to watch the moment on television, but to be there, feel the energy, feel the moment, I'll never forget. It's like my greatest sports moment in life.
That is very cool. Yeah. There's no doubt Texas will get back to that level sometime soon, assuming they don't make the playoff this year. I think they still got a little more building to go, and they'll go to another great bowl game and have a great experience there. If you could pick one game for them to go to and you're going to attend, what jumps into your mind?
And I can't pick the championship game?
Well, I mean, second runner up to the championship game would be.
Oh, I mean, selfishly, I live in LA, so a game, whatever's played at the Rose Bowl.
Yep. That's always a good pick. The Rose Bowl is a very popular destination for teams, as you would imagine. Well, Rachel, I'm gonna let you go. I know you have a million things going on. You couldn't even remember them all, but thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate you being here. Look forward to seeing you on the road sometime this year.
Absolutely. We'll definitely see each other. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. We're going to take a short break and be right back with New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick. Stay with us.
The forecast for this tax season? It's going to rain refunds. Lots of refunds. File for less and get more with TaxAct, the official tax filing software of bowl season. Go to taxact.com to get started today.
We now welcome to the show an 8-time Super Bowl champion coach, 2 times as a defensive coordinator, 6 times as a head coach, a future Hall of Famer, my former boss, and someone I feel very fortunate to call a friend, New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick. Coach, thanks for joining us today. It's always a busy time for you, but especially during game week. So I really appreciate you taking some time to join us today on the Bowl Season Stories podcast.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Nick. Always good to be with you and to be on with you today. So, thanks for the opportunity.
And I also want to assure you that despite me hosting a podcast, I have not become a member of the media without you knowing about it. I've heard you can be a tough interview. That's not coming from me. I've heard that, but I'm just a guy that used to work for you, asking you questions. That's all this is.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
All right, great. Coach, before we jump into talking about bowl games, it's well known that your father spent over 30 years as an assistant coach at Navy, and you have a special place in your heart for that program. In fact, I think you were about 4 years old when your dad first started coaching there in 1956. So I'd like to start by asking you about your love for Navy football and the impact growing up around that program had on developing your passion for the game.
Yeah, it had a lot. My dad, as you said, was there for 30 years, but when he retired in 1986, he never really stopped going to work every day and going to the football offices and being part of the Navy community for the next 20 years. So it was really a half a century there. It was really 50 years. And it was obviously a very important part of my life and my family's life as an only child. So my mom, my dad, and I, my dad was always scouted the team that Navy was going to play the following week. So he was never at any of the Navy games except for the final game, the Army-Navy game or bowl game. And so I watched all those games with my mother or listened to them on the radio if Navy played away, or went to the home games in Annapolis if they were playing at home. So, yeah, I grew up very attached to the program and very fortunate to be around a lot of the great people in those years through the programs, especially the coaches and the players. So Coach Harden and his staff, and some of the great teams that Coach Erlads, Coach Harden, had in the late 50s and 60s, and then as the years went along and I got older, then being able to work with some of them at like football camps, go to practice, be sort of like, ball boy kind of thing in the training camp periods and so forth. So I got to see leadership, toughness, teamwork at a very, very high level, regardless of how good the teams were or weren't. That was the type of player and character that they had on those teams. And that was very impactful for me. And honestly, that's kind of the way I've always tried to coach, with that type of a team mentality in mind.
Even though you grew up almost strictly around the college game, your entire career has been in the pro game. Did you ever think about coaching at the college level, or were you an NFL guy from the moment you started as an assistant with the Baltimore Colts?
No, I was in college football, but not for very long. When I graduated from college, I reached out to about 125 different Division I and 1AA schools to try to acquire a graduate assistant position. And I only heard back from about 5 or 6 of them, but NC State actually accepted me into the program. And so Coach Holtz called me in early June of 75, saying that there were 3 openings and he was going to I was going to have one of them. And so I was pretty excited to go down to NC State and be part of the graduate assistant program down there, and, get a master's in economics and so forth. And then a couple of weeks later, at the end of June, he called me and said, "Hey, I got some bad news. Title IX has passed, and all the graduate assistant positions that we have from last year are all going to females. And so I don't have anything." So Coach Holtz was the first coach to hire me. Coach Holtz was the first coach to fire me. And so I went from there to talk to Coach Marsha Broda, who was the coach of the Baltimore Colts, and asked him if I could work there, thinking that at the end of the year in January, after I got some experience in a football program as a coach, that I would be able to apply to a college and get a graduate assistant position. But it just didn't work out that way. And after Baltimore, I went to Detroit and so forth. And so that kind of never materialized, but that's where I was headed. It just didn't work out. And it was really, it was the Title IX that knocked me out of that, which it worked out all right.
It certainly did. What my biggest takeaway from that story, Coach, is that if you reached out to 125 schools and only 5 got back to you, that's 120 that might have missed something, I'm guessing. I don't know if there's any regret on their part, but that's kind of interesting. Do you think you would coach any differently if you were a head coach in college versus the NFL?
Oh, I'm sure it would be a lot different. Yeah, I'm sure it would be a lot different. Having coached with a lot of coaches who have been at both levels. So people that I've worked closely with, Coach Saban, Coach Ferentz, Pat Hill, when he was at Fresno, Coach Schiano, people like that I feel like I have a lot of common with, have worked with, that know me. And we talk about things that you do at the NFL level that you wouldn't do at college, or vice versa, and the way it's set up. And that just, it's just a different dynamic that you adapt to and work with. And as the rules have changed in both college and professional football, we've all had to adapt to those. So, but yeah, it's interesting to talk to those coaches about the programs that they run and what, what's different, what's the same, and how they try to maximize their opportunities in college. That we have more time, they have more players, they have more practice plays. So, for example, a school like Alabama, they're in the NFL. You have your defense has to show plays for your offense, and your offense has to show plays for your defense. So really, you have a full practice, but it's only half a practice for one side of the ball or the other. In college football, with the numbers that you have, you could run, over twice as many plays. Really, it's about 3 times as many plays in practice than you could run in the NFL. So colleges get a lot of their coaching and teaching on the field, In the NFL, there's more in meetings and walkthroughs. So that would be a big difference right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about bowl games a little bit. In your dad's, all your dad's years at Navy, he was a part of 6 bowl games. And I know you were able to maybe attend some when you were growing up, watched others on TV. They went to a couple of Cotton Bowls versus Rice in Texas, an Orange Bowl versus Missouri in 1961, a Holiday Bowl win over BYU in 78, a Liberty Bowl. What do you recall about those games, either being there in person or watching them on TV?
Well, the only game I was there for in person, Nick, was the Orange Bowl in 1960. I was too young for the first Cotton Bowl, but that was a big game. Rice had 2 NFL quarterbacks, 2 quarterbacks played in the NFL. And so they were very good. My dad was coaching defensive backs at that time. Of course, players went both ways. So, but I know that was a big challenge for him, and that was a big win for him. And then, of course, the Cotton Bowl in '63, was a tough loss to Texas between Navy at number 2 and Texas at number 1. So that was really for the national championship game. But I was at the Orange Bowl in '60, with Joe Bellino's Heisman Trophy year, and Joe had a pretty good game against Missouri. But I was kind of sat in the stands and cried as Navy, lost to Missouri. I think it was 21-14, and then the other games were all I was involved in the NFL. I was with a team in the NFL, and so I wasn't able to attend. But I watched as many Navy games really as I can, especially the Army Navy game and the bowl games, and the other ones in between, Notre Dame and games like that. They're pretty well, get a lot of coverage. But yeah, it was interesting because, as you know, in the college bowl season, teams play through, let's call it mid to late November. Now the Army Navy game goes longer than that, but generally speaking, those teams play through the mid-November. And then essentially take a month off, and then play, somewhere around, the very end of December, or early part of January. And that's a long time for a team to not play. And it is what it is. But I think it's hard for a team that has played a full, whatever, 10, 11, 12 game schedule to then take a month off and then play those kind of big games. I think a lot of times you didn't see the best football in those bowl games. The way the playoff format is structured now, there's a little bit more of a, weekly playoff format. And so I think that probably helps the overall quality of the game a little bit. But I know for a football team to miss, call it a month of actually playing football, that's probably not the best way to have your top performance in that game. So I think it's probably good the way that the formatting has gone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, for some people, bowl games are kind of as much of a tradition over the holidays, as the holidays themselves. Besides the games Navy played in, do you have any memories of watching bowl games, turning the TV on between Christmas and New Year's and seeing these strange matchups in these strange locations?
Well, of course, when I was a kid, there were really only 4 games. The Rose Bowl, Cotton Bowl, Sugar Bowl, and the Orange Bowl, and then a couple other ones kind of filtered in there a little bit. The Gator Bowl, but there was really the 4 playoff or the 4 January 1st games, and so almost every year that I can remember, my mom's family, her parents, and all of her brothers and sisters were in Florida. So we would make a 2-day drive from Maryland down to Florida, like around maybe call it the 20th or so of December, and then come back on that weekend because they didn't work on New Year's Day, and depending on what day it fell, there was another day around there. But generally speaking, we were always on the road on New Year's Day, but we still pulled off. So get up early, drive at 4 a.m, and then watch football, and then, do the rest of the drive the next day or the day before. So it was always a big football day, but it's usually on the road. It's usually at a motel. So that's what I kind of remember about those. But the matchups were always, because there were so few teams, the matchups were always, monumental. And now with so many bowl games, which gives so many colleges and so many kids more of an opportunity to participate in those. And I remember when I went to Stevens' game, my son Stevens' game at Rutgers in the Pinstripe Bowl, that was really quite an experience to sit in the stands and watch the watched the game in Yankee Stadium, and that was a very interesting and fun experience. So I think it's great for the kids and the programs. And I'll say this, around here, I can't even tell you how many of our players have backpacks or things like that that they carry around that have the insignia from the bowl game that they played in. So those games really carry a lot of weight with them, and I know they're great memories for the people that participate in them.
Yeah, well, the number of bowl games, as you noted, has grown over the years from 4 to there's 42 now, and there's one played right in Navy Stadium, the Military Bowl. They have a great matchup every year, Pinstripe Bowl, as you named, and really great experiences for these student athletes. I know bowl season comes at a really busy time of year for you, but do you still try to watch some games? They're on pretty much every day for 2 weeks, and are there any favorites that you have?
Yeah, it's tough, really. I don't see much college football during the fall, but then once our season's over, I see a ton of college football in evaluating players for the college draft. So my time to see that is after the season. Again, occasionally I'll try to catch a Navy game, or when we travel on Saturday, you might have time to catch a part of a night game or an afternoon game or something like that. But we always have meetings and things like that going on. So it's rare that I would sit down and watch a game during the season, but it would be rare when the season's over for me not to watch several games per day of the players that we're scouting in the draft. So and you like to see those games because it's usually a different matchup. You can see them playing their conference teams or that type of schedule, and then in the bowl games, you get the matchups against teams that they haven't played against. Obviously, the other team has good players on their team as well, and so it's usually interesting to watch those games and see how the athletes compete against each other in that situation.
Last question for you, Coach, and I'm going to maybe a little bit of a tougher question, but I'm interested in getting your perspective on this. The mindset of athletes seems to be changing quite a bit. And in college football, we're seeing players opt out of bowl games more frequently than before in order to avoid injury as they prepare for the draft, et cetera. You're known for your thorough evaluation of players in your own draft preparation, not only their athletic ability and performance on the field, but also their character and mental makeup. What factor, if any, does a player opting out of a bowl game play in your evaluation of him and his ability to be a good fit for your organization?
Yeah, that's a really good question, a tough question, Nick. I think kind of for me, the first one that I really remember on this one was Christian McCaffrey when he opted out at Stanford. And Christian as such a tough competitive athlete and, a team player and all that. And it seemed like kind of a little bit of an odd move at the time. Now, of course, it's become, very commonplace. Especially in the bowl games that aren't part of the championship series. So I think most of the athletes in the championship series, most of those play in the bowl games, if not all of them. So it's a little bit different there. But I think after I got through the initial adjustment to it, that it's just, an athlete, you see, I remember the kid at Michigan tearing up his knee and, some injuries that happened in those games that really affected the players' careers. So there's two sides to that. And I think that, I respect whatever decision, any individual athlete or team makes or has to make. And, just try to take it into consideration and depending on what the circumstances were and all that, then evaluate what the decision was. But I do think it's become a little bit of a challenging situation for a player, for an athlete, for his agent, for his family, about what he's accomplished and what's in front of him, and then what the upside is to another bowl game. As I said, in some cases where the athlete hasn't played in 3 or 4 weeks, and what kind of football condition is he really in to play that game. So I think that really gets left up to each of the individual athletes. I try not to be too judgmental on that. I can see both sides of it now a lot better than I did when it first happened probably 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, Coach, we first met over 20 years ago when you hired me back in 2001. We've been able to stay in touch over the years since then. And you've always been a great friend and a mentor to me in ways you may not even realize. So I want to thank you personally for that and for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it. And good luck this season.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. It was a pleasure to be with you. And, I have a ton of respect for what you did for me and your involvement in other endeavors along the way, and now in the College Bowl Series. So thanks for all you've done for me. Thanks for what you do for the game, for the college game, and look forward to catching up with you down the road. Thanks. It's a pleasure.
Great. Thanks, Coach.
We're
going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with our next guest. Stay tuned. And our final guest is brought to you by Tap It. Understand how going cashless builds loyalty, engages fans, and boosts your bottom line. We now welcome to the show the CEO of Florida Citrus Sports, Steve Hogan. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nick.
Steve, tell our audience a little bit about Florida Citrus Sports. Now, we know you operate the Citrus Bowl and the Cheez-It Bowl, but you do so much more than that. For people that don't know, what is Florida Citrus Sports all about?
Yeah, Florida Citrus Sports is a not-for-profit, which my board would tell you is tax status, not a business philosophy. We're just what we do with our resources mandates that we're an economic organization here in our community. So we're driven by impact. We want to put heads in beds, turn on TV sets around the world. At the end of the day, we want to use those resources in our platform to impact our community immediately, especially around the stadium in a socio-impact way. When you look at affordable housing, early education, all those kinds of things. So anyway, we're an impact company is the way I describe it, economic and socioeconomic, and that's what we're paid to do.
Well, we're going to get back to the bowl games and Florida Citrus Sports and again in a minute, but I want to talk about you for a second. You've been with Florida Citrus Sports for over 25 years. I think you and I have known each other most of that time. You worked your way up from the events department. Eventually, you were named CEO in 2006. What has the journey been like for you as your career grew and as the organization grew, kind of simultaneously?
Yeah, it's been exciting, scary, and then exciting. It's like anybody in sports. I mean, I think you have ambitions to be in an impactful position. You want to grow your career. This better than anybody. And in the industry, young kids, you get in and you're faced with choices all the time. Do I need to leave to go up a step, come check back in at a later point in my career? And I've just been blessed that through my years here, there's always been a new challenge. The organization, the board, my previous two CEOs that I worked for. Ultimately, I was the COO for Chuck Rowe, who had been here for 20 years himself. Gave way to Tom Mickle, who is an amazing CEO that came from the ACC, Atlantic Coast Conference, and Duke. I was his COO. So in each of those steps, they gave me new challenges. It kept me interested, showed me that they still had a plan of progression for me. And so it's been exciting all the way through. Stadium renovations, the addition of the second bowl game. We've done college all-star games, NFL Pro Bowls, international soccer matches. And I think that's been the best part is the challenges by all of those executives in our community leadership to say we can do more, we can be more impactful. And it's made it really hard to say, I'm going to go take some other opportunity somewhere else. And I'm so lucky that was the calculus that I made.
Well, we talked about you hosting two bowl games. Is having two bowl games in the same stadium an advantage, or is it more of a challenge for you and your staff than a one game event during bowl season?
Yeah, no, clearly a challenge, but an exciting one. And it really is a resource management, staff management, volunteer management challenge. But once you started to perfect it, right? I mean, it's kind of, I don't want to say routine, but it feels natural to us now. We have 4 teams in town all at one time, hospitality events, practice sites, police escorts, you name it, going on literally at the same time. The games are played a few days apart. But the blessing of Orlando, I think, is that really at any given week, there's probably 1.5 million people in town that don't live here. Our community is used to having that volume. There might be a 40,000 person convention at the convention center, and you wouldn't know, right? That Clemson, Iowa, and Kentucky and Iowa State were here. They didn't see each other unless we forced them together. You got Disney, Universal, SeaWorld, on and on and on. So we're blessed, but I would say it was a resource and staff challenge in the early days, but became really exciting, and our community has really gravitated to it. And the relationship with 4 Power 5 conferences that are usually teams that are ranked in the top 25 has made it a really cool, fun week, at least for Orlando, to participate in college football's postseason in that way, in bowl season.
Well, I know teams across the country want to play in bowl games in Orlando. So
you were a part of making that happen. So, but for you and our Big East relationship, right? I mean, you were there.
I was proud of that. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Now, you're a past chairman of Bowl Season's executive committee. It was known as the Football Bowl Association at the time. You know how important it is for the bowls to support one another. We're kind of a big family. You guys don't really compete with one another. You all do the same thing, but it's in different communities, different markets, all with the same mission of promoting the game of college football. You guys served as our host for our annual meeting last year. I want to say publicly how appreciative I am of the effort of you and your staff. We had, for those listening, we had over 500 people who work for bowl games, do business with bowl games. It was the only time of year that we all come together in one place. What impact do you see being made on the entire bowl system with the collective effort we've put together with bowl season?
Yeah, so proud. I think people would be proud if they got to know those staffs, the communities, their volunteers in those communities, the philanthropic commitments made in each of those communities, even though sometimes unique, nonetheless, a heavy lift, very impactful in their own right. But the sheer focus collectively, the collegiality of the bowl organizations, the bowl leadership, us as members, you're right. We don't compete day to day work. It's very pretty much regimented. We're trying to do the best job we can do for student athletes, coaches, administrators, and their families. It's not lost on us that 10, 11, 12,000 kids are playing this sport at the highest level. And maybe 100 of them are going to stick and get paid to do this, right? And that's important, right? We cheer that. We want to see that. But we all are focused intentionally on those 10,000 kids. What portion of them are ultimately going to play in a postseason experience, their last, maybe the only time they played in their career, right? What's the future look like? What's their experience that they'll look back 20 years from now and say, it was meaningful that I went to a World War II museum, or I learned about how they're investing in at-risk neighborhoods in Orlando, right? So I think most of the country would be amazingly proud with your leadership, our board, our executive committee at that level, really all of college athletics. And the bowls just are an important part of that fabric, bowl season, and their focus on the kids and the fans and the families that matter. That to me is what I don't think ever gets out there. But if you've been a player and you've been a family member and you have attended, you know that to be true, and you would tell that story the rest of your life. And I think that's something that we're all very, very proud of.
Yeah, I think you do speak on behalf of all of us when you say that. And, that's one of our goals in bowl season stories. We've had a lot of great guests who've participated in bowl games, and it usually hits us as we get older, Steve, which you and I are getting older for sure. As you get older, people who've played in bowl games 10, 20 years down the road, as we talk to them on this podcast, they look back and they go, wow, I'd do anything to play in one more game. That was my last opportunity to play with my friends, kind of like being on vacation with, you can go on vacation whenever you want, but when can you do it with, 100 of your closest friends? So many great memories for those guys.
Yeah. Look at 9 or 10,000 kids again, and their extended think about their families that are actually going to these and enjoying that week with them. It'd be a shame. And I'm so proud. And I think that, what we're both alluding to is how serious people take that job. Right. It's bowls do a lot of things. We have things to sell. We have sponsors to sell, and that makes it fun and wacky in and of itself. Right. And they're an important part of the financial fabric of the postseason. But if you talk to the people, they take it as job number one, that you are creating that memory, that experience. You're fully invested in the kid, the student athlete, the coaches and their families. And that's something to be proud of. And I think you can look back, and that's what the rest of it makes bowl season fun for all of us. And the events and the, dumping mayonnaise and Cheez-It boxes on everybody. But in the end, if the fans knew how much time the volunteers in those communities put into that week that they're never going to forget, they'd be amazingly proud of what bowl season is.
One of the things I'm really proud of is the philanthropic efforts and the investment in the community that you with Florida Citrus Sports are probably at the top of that list, but every bowl does it to some extent. You alluded to this a minute ago. Florida Citrus Sports was heavily involved with the creation of Lift Orlando, a 501c3 organization aimed at breaking the cycle of poverty in Orlando's at-risk communities. It's been around for almost a decade. Tell us more about that. Tell us about the impact the effort has had on your community.
Yeah, I'm most proud of Lift Orlando, of anything I've ever done in my athletic, if you call it career. I'm not an athlete in any respect, but my involvement around athletes through Florida Citrus Sports, I'm more proud of Lift and Lift Orlando, and I hope people go look it up. But the idea, Camping World Stadium, the original Citrus Bowl, 70 plus years old at the time, was in desperate need of investment to keep up. And we ultimately achieved that. So $250,000 for starters, rip down the old building, rebuild it. But it's in the poorest zip code in Central Florida. Like many stadiums, pro, collegiate, in some cases around the country are in the cheapest real estate. And for the most part, you saw little or no investment in the poorest zip code in Central Florida. Really weren't many of our great African-American leaders settled in the 40s and 50s here, built homes, a lot of educators, a lot of famous legislators, admirals. They're here, right? So the history, but there was no investment in this community for probably 50 years for the most part. And so thus, you see the outcomes of that, the results of that. And the stadium was going to get this $250,000 investment. And, you're proud of that, but we stepped back for a second and said, we've always been an impact company. We've always been invested in children and education since 1947. This is maybe an opportunity where you hear all the time, build this new facility here and it will trickle down and everybody will benefit from it. We know that that's not true. We had a chance to say, what if it was? What if a sports facility could connect on a vascular level with the residents that live in its shadow? Wouldn't that be the legacy to say, somehow instead of a kid walking around a football stadium to get to high school or elementary school could say, man, that's a beating heart in my community of resource and opportunity. They're going to think about that later in life, but as kids, we wanted that to be true. So here we were, we set course and said, we're going to do that. And it took a year to do in-home surveys and talk to mom and grandma, 1,400 of those surveys. And the 4 things that they said they would do if they could wave a magic wand were, I need a safe, affordable place to live. I got to have the best education money can buy. I got to have access to better jobs and job growth. And I need places to go be healthy. I need to see a proper doctor. I need to be outside and play and be active. Those are the 4 things, right? So we said, hey, we're going to join you in that battle. Here we are 10 years later now, $100 million. And we've built a brand new outdoor state-of-the-art Lake Lorna Dune Park, got an NFL Play 60 field. You got a Bay Hill punting course, yada, yada, yada. We got 2 affordable housing communities, 2 blocks literally from the stadium, the best early education school that you could buy, run by Primrose and Advent Health here in the community, a $10 million Boys and Girls Club. In a couple months, we'll open a 30,000 square foot health and wellness building. So I'll close with this thought, and I thank you. And I know it's long, but you appreciate this. I appreciate this. But the idea is, if you could take those structural assets in the poorest zip code in Central Florida and say, without regard to money, you as a kid now, without taking 4 bus transfers to do it, can achieve all in your own right, and just as much as the wealthiest community that you compete against here in Central Florida. And you're seeing that now. They can walk to the best education. They can walk to those jobs. They've got a safe, affordable place to live, on and on and on. So I will close, Nick, on this issue with this. I know we'll probably be short on time, but I tell you, ask Coach Saban, ask Coach Harbaugh, ask Dabo Swinney from this most recent year, ask all of them what their kids felt when they spent time after knowing this about the stadium and knowing what's happening a few blocks away, and then meeting those kids here for a day with the kids, with all 4 teams. I can tell you, in all my years here, the last 10 years, I've had no less than a dozen kids from each team walk up to me and go, I grew up in that neighborhood. I grew up in a neighborhood just like that. The fact that I'm playing in this game and in some small way making that contribution to changing that dynamic has been the most powerful thing to them. And so I couldn't be more proud of that fact. I think, Nick, more than anything, is that message is getting out through these players, and they feel enriched by bringing their talent in some small way to a postseason game and changing that for a kid that they identify with. So thank you for the indulgence.
Steve, that is awesome. We can hear the passion in your voice. I can't blame you. I hope this is the most listened to segment of all the podcasts we've done, because people need to hear what you just said. People turn on the TV and they watch a bowl game for 3 hours in December, which in and of its own right is great. But what you're doing specifically in Orlando, and what the bowl system as a whole across 42 communities across the country is, really a massive effort of good, and people need to know more about that story. Yeah, so thanks so much for sharing it. And I know you're busy. Obviously you've got a lot going on. Thanks for joining us, Steve. And thanks for all you do for the game of college football. We really appreciate it.
You too, Nick. Appreciate everything. Have a great week.
And thank all of you for listening to this week's Bowl Season Stories podcast. Please join us next week when we will welcome another lineup of great guests. If you like the show, we'd appreciate you dropping a 5-star rating for the podcast. And as always, you can follow all the podcast and bowl season news on our website, bowlseason.com, and on social media @bowlseason. Thanks for listening.